What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. Good morning, good morning. So today we are finally resolving this this oil issue with my M4 GTS. Talked to a lot of people, got a lot of different recommendations, and the first thing that I did to just make sure that this car was good and that we actually weren't leaking oil was to check underneath the car, obviously, and inside of the engine bay to make sure that we weren't in fact leaking any oil. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to troubleshoot before going ahead and ordering this sensor, because it's not a cheap sensor. And I did read and hear from a lot of people even reached out. Thank you to everyone that reached out to me and was trying to help me troubleshoot this. But I did have a few people who were running boot mode tunes that got this error and then ended up reflashing, and the error went away and it never came back, and then the system was properly reading the oil levels. So for some people it definitely could have been a tune gremlin or something like that. First thing I did when I got home from New Jersey was obviously reflash the map, try a few different maps. I tried just the stock map, I tried reflashing in my multi-map, but no matter what I did, I was still getting the minimum oil warning on the iDrive. So I knew it wasn't the tune, we had ruled that out. I knew that the car obviously wasn't leaking a quart of oil. We would see that. Everything is bone dry underneath the car. I got underneath it on Sunday when we got back and just checked everything to make sure that there was no possible sign of leakage. But even if there were, I mean, that would have to be like a pretty massive leak. The car isn't burning oil, so we knew that wasn't it. Really, the only thing that we hadn't tried was the sensor. So that is what we are going to tackle today, and hopefully that is the problem. So then it came time for me to research, getting the part, which is the actual oil sensor itself, which is this guy right here. Now, I had assumed that this sensor was just gonna be the same as like any S55, F80, M3, M4, but it in fact is not. The CS and the GTS share a different sensor because they have this little plate. It's like a little spacer in between the sensor and the oil pan, which allows for more oil capacity in the actual engine itself. So when you do oil changes on this car, it's about 7.5 liters. But with my car in particular, I also have a larger capacity oil cooler in this car. So you do want to take that into consideration. But nonetheless, we ended up putting, another quart into this car while we were like first on a road trip to try and figure out if it was, actually just low on oil. But now we should be well over 8.5 quarts of oil in this car. So we definitely know that the car isn't low on oil. It's just this sensor is probably bad. Now, you guys can totally do this install at home. This is like a very, very easy install. The sensor is located right on the bottom of the oil pan. Just have to take that metal panel off that's underneath, and then you can go ahead and access the sensor, drain out all the oil, undo the 3 bolts that are on the sensor, drop it, put in the new one, put in your new oil, and you should be good. I am just gonna head to the shop because they have an open lift, so 10 times easier than me crawling on the garage floor. So yeah, let's hope that this sensor solves our issue today. I was a little bit worried, looking for the part because it is a special part, being that it's only on the CS and GTS. It's a little bit different. My fear was that, it would have to come from like Germany, and then I would be stuck out of a part for a while. Parts are kind of weird right now, but I was able to rush deliver it for like an extra 25 bucks. I got it here in a day through my BMW dealership. Let's go ahead and throw this thing on, and hopefully it fixes the issue. One thing that I did notice is when we were doing our crank hub on this car, my oil sensor was a little bit moist. You could see that it wasn't quite leaking oil out of the sensor, but the oil was definitely starting to make its way into the sensor. And so after I got this issue with the car, I went through all of the scenarios in my head, and I did remember that that sensor, it wasn't bone dry. So it's very possible that the seal on my old sensor just started to fail, oil got in it, and then ultimately just ruined the sensor itself. From what I understand, these sensors failing is a pretty well-known issue in the S55s, like across the board. So I'm not entirely surprised. However, this car does only have 30,000 miles on it, which is, in my opinion, kind of early for a sensor to go out, but you never know with these things. BMWs being BMWs, am I right? But getting a low oil warning on your iDrive is obviously not a settling experience. Your brain immediately goes to worst case scenario, like I'm starving the engine of oil, this thing's going to blow up, I'm gonna lose a motor. So I think if this does happen to any of you guys, the first thing you should do is go ahead and put in an extra quart of oil. Make sure you're not leaking underneath. But if you're still getting this warning on the iDrive after you put in another quart of oil, I highly suggest not throwing in more oil, because having too much oil in the engine could be catastrophic as well. So once you know for a fact the car has, more oil than it needs, it's probably time to start researching other options. If you're on boot mode, maybe try reflash. If that doesn't work, then you're gonna have to fork up the money for the sensor. I ended up having to rush ship mine because it's the special part for the GTS, and I didn't want this car down for too long. So I think I ended up paying like $260 for the sensor shipped directly to BMW. I think the normal S55 sensors are like I wanna say $235 or $240 or something like that. So hopefully this does the trick for us today. Would really like to just have this car back to health so I can just enjoy it and drive the car. So one thing that I did find kind of interesting and that I am considering is the GT4 uses a traditional oil dipstick in its oil pan. So rather than having the electronic oil system, you just have a dipstick. Beamer World makes a retrofit kit of the GT4 dipstick onto our normal S55s that use the electronic measuring system. So what you would end up doing is using their retrofit kit. It's only like $500, and then you would go ahead and probably just remove all of the electronic system or just code it out, something like that. As much as I would prefer that this car had like the traditional oil dipstick like my E36 M3, you also pose, issues down the road if you tried to resell the car. You're not certain that the other person who bought it would want to have a traditional oil dipstick. So I'm not really sure if I'm gonna do that, but it is a cool option. Yes, sir. We're gonna drain out this oil, and then I'll show you guys where the sensor is. Pretty easy. Yeah, I'll show you guys my current sensor on here. It's got a little bit of moisture in it, so pretty sure that's why it went bad. Probably just an old seal or a bad seal or something. But she's not leaking, so we know it's not that. So he's gonna drop that, and then we'll just drop the metal pan right here, and we'll be able to access the oil sensor. Bone dry. You see a little bit of oil right there. This is what I was talking about before. The seal on the sensor is probably bad, and oil probably got into the sensor. But the pan and everything looks dry. So it's definitely not leaking oil. So it's got to be a bad sensor, man. Has to be. So you got 310s right here. You just pop this off. Obviously we're gonna drain the oil because we're doing an oil change, but you got 310s. You pop off this clip, and that's your oil sensor. Pissin'. Oil looks brand new. It's like completely clear. So we'll see how much this actually fills up. So that's how much we had in there. Definitely plenty of oil. Kind of what tells you that the sensor is definitely bad. Another crank hub going down. Check out this thing. Completely destroyed. Engine was salvageable though, so luckily he didn't lose the engine.
Be my one on one, be my only one, you're my only love, be my heartbreak, be my one on one, be my only one, you're my only love. Message, hit me now.
Oh, with the old and with the new. So you guys can see the spacer right here that's on the GTS's to allow for more oil capacity. For the track part. Can you hand me those 3 bolts right there? I need to get mine. But this guy's selling them for $1,000 and I'm like, so this is the oil we're using. We used the same oil last time. Basically, the normal S55 would take 7 liters of oil. The GTS S55 takes 7¼ liters of oil, and we are going to be putting in 7½ liters of oil to make up for the larger Mishimoto oil cooler, and then we should be good.
Be my heartbreak, be my one on one, be my only one, you're my only.
All right, so we are good. Filled her up, 7½ liters of oil. And we should be all set. We'll let her warm up here and then start the measurement process on the iDrive. We'll see where we're at. All right, let's start the measurement. Pray, everyone pray.
Look at that, look at that.
Yeah, so we'll just have to
like
watch
that
it.
a little bit more. Some people don't care.
Yeah.
So
Cool. So we're good.
everything else should be good. Okay.
Well, good to know it's not anything serious, right? Anytime you see an oil-related issue, it can be a bit nerve-wracking, because I didn't really know what the purpose of the cause was, but just ended up being that sensor, which is crazy. 30,000 miles, that sensor took a dump on me. But it was, you know, when we were doing the crank hub, I did notice a little bit of moisture around that sensor, and that kind of had me thinking, like, right away, I wonder if we should just replace that. I remember going through that specifically when I saw it. So this could have happened sooner, but it was obviously just really bad timing, being that it was right before the keys show. But I'm just grateful we got it fixed and nothing's actually wrong with the car. It's stupid sensor. Really could have used a dipstick at that point in time, but you know, it was more of a guessing game than anything. So if you guys have this issue in your S55, you end up getting that light, you know, obviously first, maybe throw on a quart of oil, see what the car says. Obviously check for any leaks. If your boot mode tuned, maybe check the tune. And then I would say last resort before you spend $250 or whatever on a new sensor would be buy the sensor and replace it. Anyways, I'm just glad to have her back healthy and running. We are good. We are good now. Got more things on deck. And we're also getting into some E30 content coming up soon here. But I want to thank you guys for watching the video. Appreciate all the love and support. Gonna wrap this one up. Love you all. See you in the next one. Peace.